Joining us now is Leon Yin. He's an investigative journalist and data scientist at The Markup, which is a nonprofit newsroom focused on tech accountability. Leon's work centers around the effects of commercial content moderation and market dominance. Leon, thank you so much for joining us. How are you today?
Great. Thank you for having me.
The pleasure is ours. I came across your recent article, and because of the nature of the work that I do in the YouTube space, and working with and oftentimes against the algorithm, your article stood out to me. Could you tell us about the keyword blocklist that you found and how it reflected the difference between how social justice issues were treated as opposed to white lives matter?
Yeah. So last week, my reporting partner, Aaron Seck, and I released a two-part investigation looking at this block list. The first part, as you mentioned, is about hate, and the second is looking at social and racial justice. So a little background is that YouTube ads brings in $20 billion of revenue to its parent company, Google. And Google, the nervous system of the ads is their ad portal. So we looked at a specific thing called placements, which you can use to search for YouTube videos and channels related to something like skateboarding. So if I'm an advertiser, I'd put in skateboarding, and it would allow me to actually handpick the channels to place ads on. We found that not all searches return stuff. So a lot of it returns nothing. And we were able to distinct the difference between gibberish and something that returned nothing, like if I smashed my keyboard and just randomly pressed keys, versus terms that were blocked. And we did that by going behind the scenes and looking at the code being returned for like swears to see what was getting blocked and just a bunch of nonsense. So it kind of equates to getting like an empty envelope for gibberish and an envelope with an empty letter for gibberish and just an empty envelope for stuff that's blocked. And so we created keyword lists of hate and justice words with experts. So our social justice list, we worked with Color of Change, Miente, Media Justice, and Muslim advocates. And we sent that through that portal. And indeed, we found that terms like Black Lives Matter and Black Power were blocked, whereas the hate counterparts, White Lives Matter and White Power, were allowed for search.
Wow. So I just want to unpack that a little bit for the audience. So using the methodology that you all established, you then took a list of keywords and you found that keywords like Black Lives Matter or Black Power, those words were blocked, while openly racist terms like White Lives Matter were not. What was the frequency? Like, what was the ratio of like justice terms that were blocked? And when we say blocked, like, this ties directly to the ability of channels to monetize and make money off of these, right? Like, so when we post a video here, a lot of times we have to dance around the algorithm and not say specific words to make sure our videos don't get flagged. But then anytime we have to cover like a social justice issue, it's almost guaranteed to get flagged in so many cases. And what you're saying is that this is a part of that reality.
It essentially makes videos of those topics harder for advertisers to find and say, I want my ad to show up on this video. So that certainly is a financial impact of this work. And so the ratio, to get to your first question, we created really small keyword lists of well-known terms. And so the denominator is kind of small. So we looked at 86 hate terms, and about 1/3 were blocked. And we found that for phrases that were blocked, if you just removed spaces, you could get around the block in almost all of them. And an innovative technique we developed called pluralization, where you add an S, also gets around the block. So white nationalists is blocked, but not white nationalists. When we look at social and racial justice, about 1/4 of terms were originally blocked.
Wow. So what are the implications on the implications in terms of how this is deployed, how it impacts content creators? You mentioned that it impacts advertisers, their inability to get access to those videos. And then the second question is have you had any response or feedback from Google with regards to what you found?
Yeah. So the response, we reached out to Google about 2 weeks before publication. we gave them everything. So when I say everything, I mean we gave them all the data from beak to butt, like all the raw code, basically how did we collect the data, how we analyzed it, nice spreadsheets to tap through. We also sent them detailed questions and 2 expertly reviewed methodologies that we created that explained how we did everything. And after 1 week, they got back and they only responded to our questions about the hate methodology. They said they had no problems with our findings, and they said we did a bad job. We messed up on hate. We fixed the problem, and we also, any ads that you would have placed on any of those hate videos wouldn't have showed up because we have extra systems of protection. So it's all about opacity here. This block list was not publicly known. And this additional protection that they mentioned also was not previously known. They neglected to answer a single question we had about social and racial justice. They pretty much ignored it completely. And instead of taking terms off their block list, like Black Lives Matter, they doubled down. They blocked even more terms. And these are terms that, there's no explanation to why they blocked terms like Black in tech, anti-racist, civil rights. It ended up being about 80% of terms now were blocked. And it was done in such a way that further study is difficult because they mix up the signals of what we originally found as a block to what was actually for obscure searches, so that empty response. So they swapped that to make it more difficult. And when we followed up with more questions, they stopped answering our emails completely, which is incredibly uncommon.
Wow. And so I guess my next question then you wouldn't be able to answer because they didn't answer it. Why they draw an equivalence between social justice terms and hate terms, right? It gets to this both sidesism, like this where all if you're fighting against injustices, you're just as bad as the people committing the injustices. And so they have no response to that kind of question whatsoever.
So they have a clear policy for hate speech and hate, and they say we don't abide by it. It's not advertiser friendly. It shouldn't even exist on our platform in the first place. So there, it's a little more clear. It's less clear why they block things like Black in tech and Black Lives Matter. So we know that my reporting partner, Aaron Sankin, went through basically all the policies that YouTube has. And one of them is that they do not allow targeting on identity or belief. However, Black Lives Matter is not about, it's not targeted to a single identity, right? A lot of these, so there's not really an explanation to why these are blocked. So, and until they acknowledge this, what they've done, it's hard to say.
Fascinating. So what then? What are the conclusions that you all have in terms of you and your research partner, the data that you put out? Is it just this is the way they're doing it? Was there any avenue to circumvent it in terms of the justice terms? Because again, like I said, like this is a prevalent problem in particularly in our spaces because of our inability to even monetize videos discussing these types of things. And I know it's not one for one, the algorithm that we're up against versus the block list, but what are some of the things that you recommend in response to this? Or is it the reality that this is just what we're dealing with when we're using a platform like YouTube?
It's just another opaque system. And the strangest part is it's essentially a content moderation strategy, but it's all the way at the end. So rather than at least for hate, rather than, getting rid of hate completely from the platform, they simply blindfold advertisers at the end. So it's very downstream. I'm not sure what the implications are for social and racial justice. When we talked to a YouTuber named Jada Jones, she was disappointed to find YouTube's behavior. This is especially concerning considering last year, CEO Susan Wojcicki pledged $100 million to a Black Creators Fund, in which she said, at YouTube, we believe that Black Lives Matter, and we need to do more to dismantle systemic racism. It doesn't appear that they're dismantling anything. If anything, they're upholding a form of systematic racism by blocking social justice and racial justice terms and allowing hate terms to go by unfettered.
and that was the thing that stuck out in the article, was the fact that YouTube is trying to promote in their own way Black content creators. But when you really drill down into it, it's not particularly Black content creators who are fighting for social justice, because of how those social justice terms are literally blocked on their platform. Am I hearing that correctly?
Correct. And it's
Yeah.
there's no reason to think that advertisers don't want this either. Like, we talked to some advertisers like Ben and Jerry's, and they want to associate their brands with social and racial justice movements like Black Lives Matter. So it's, and also other brand support is up. Yesterday I saw an HP ad that had references to Black Lives Matter that was on YouTube. So it's really uncertain. It's unclear why they made this decision and why they decided to double down, and they've not explained why they've made these decisions.
Leon Yin, investigative journalist and data scientist for The Markup. Thanks so much for joining me.
My pleasure.